Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to be honest with you, when I saw the book we're covering today sitting on the top of the stack, I had a moment of, well, a little hesitation.
I get that.
Yeah, a little flashback to blushing in health class. It's not every day we tackle a topic that feels this, personal.
It is personal for sure, but it's also one of those topics that touches almost everyone, yet we almost never talk about it with any real uh, depth or accuracy.
That's exactly the feeling I got reading this. We are diving into She Comes First, The Thinking Man's Guide to Pleasuring a Woman by Ian Kerner.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the title sounds like it could be a quiz in a magazine or something you'd hide in a drawer. But as I got into it, I realized this isn't really a sex book in the way I expected. It feels more like a communication manual.
That is the perfect way to frame it.
Yeah.
Ian Kerner is a clinical sexologist, but he approaches this almost like a linguist
Mm-hmm.
or a mechanic even. Yeah. He's not just offering tips for a Saturday night. He's arguing there's a fundamental knowledge gap, a literacy issue, really, between men and women that's like actively sabotaging our relationships.
A literacy issue. That's a really interesting way to put it for this subject.
Well, it's central to his whole argument. He makes this fascinating comparison between being a good lover and being a good writer. Did you ever have to read Strunk and White's The Elements of Style in college?
Oh, absolutely. Omit needless words. The little book that terrified every English major.
Exactly. So Strunk and White is the Bible of clear, effective writing. And Kerner explicitly references it. He argues that sex has a grammar, just like language does.
Okay.
There are nouns, verbs, punctuation. And his main argument is that most men are walking around speaking just absolute gibberish.
So men are mumbling their way through the bedroom.
Or shouting when they should be whispering.
Yeah.
He argues that to really pleasure a woman, you have to master the grammar of oral sex, cunnilingus. But he completely reframes its role.
Right. He hates the word foreplay.
Hates it. Thinks it's totally dismissive.
So he comes up with his own term.
He calls it core play.
Core play. I like that.
It totally changes the hierarchy, The idea is that oral sex isn't the appetizer. It's not the thing you do to get the engine running for the real event. He argues that for a woman, biologically, anatomically, oral sex is the main event.
It should be the centerpiece.
It should be the centerpiece. He basically says the tongue is mightier than the sword.
Which is a catchy phrase, but it's a massive claim. It totally upends the script that most of us have been handed, where everything centers around intercourse.
Everything.
But before we get to the the grammar of the tongue and all that, we have to talk about why he thinks this shift is so necessary.
Right. If the system ain't broke, don't fix it. But Kerner's point is that the system is very, very broke.
He calls it a mismatch.
The sexual mismatch. And this isn't just based on anecdotes. He brings a lot of data to the table. The core of the problem, he says, is that men and women are on completely different biological clocks.
You don't mean in terms of age.
No. In terms of arousal speed, it's this evolutionary irony. If you look at the male design, what's the biological goal of sex?
From an evolutionary standpoint. Propagation, passing on genes.
Exactly. And nature favors efficiency. So men are designed for speed. Kerner cites data from the Kinsey Institute, which is really the gold standard, suggesting that the typical man ejaculates within 2 minutes of penetration.
2 minutes. That is fast.
It's incredibly efficient for making babies. It's just terrible for a Friday night date. 75% of men, according to that data.
Okay, so that's the male timeline. What about the female timeline?
Women are not microwaves, they are slow cookers. The physiology of female arousal is so much more complex. It often takes 15 to 20 minutes of consistent rhythmic stimulation just to get to the plateau phase, let alone orgasm.
So, okay, do the math. You have one person running a 100-meter dash, and the other person is geared up for a marathon.
And the sprinter finishes, looks around, and wonders why the marathon runner isn't at the finish line yet. It creates this huge disconnect. He even quotes some Taoist wisdom, saying the male is yang easily aroused, easily retreats. The female is yin slow to arouse, slow to be satiated.
And this mismatch leads directly to what he calls the orgasm gap.
The gap is huge. This is where he brings in the Sex in America survey. It found that 75% of men always orgasm during sex.
Okay, and for women?
Less than a third, about 29%.
Wow. So in a typical heterosexual encounter, it's basically a guarantee for the guy and less than a 1 in 3 shot for the woman.
Right. And Kerner says this just leaves women frustrated like a sentence that's been cut off. He actually calls them dangling participles.
Huh. So what's his solution? Because if biology's the problem, you can't just rewrite your DNA. Is he saying men just need to, I don't know, think about baseball and try to last 20 minutes?
That is exactly what he doesn't want. He knows that trying to force a man to last that long during vigorous intercourse is difficult, and frankly, it just kills the mood. The guy's just in his head focusing on not finishing.
Yeah, nobody wants a partner who is mentally doing long division just to stay in the game.
Exactly. So he advocates for something he calls the postponement of male gratification. But, and this is the key thing, he doesn't mean denying pleasure. He just means changing the order of operations.
Okay, break that down. How does that fix the time gap?
It's pure logic. If you make sure she is satisfied first, hence the title of the book,
She comes first.
right, then the pressure about how long intercourse lasts completely disappears. If she's already had an orgasm, maybe multiple orgasms, from the core play, then intercourse is just a shared intimacy, not a race against the clock.
That makes so much sense. If the goal is already met, everything else is just a bonus. It takes the pressure off.
Completely. It removes the performance anxiety for the man because he knows his partner is already happy. It becomes a win-win.
You know, what I found so compelling about the author, Ian Kerner, is how vulnerable he is about all this. Usually these guides are written by people who claim they're, legends in the bedroom. But Kerner admits he started from a place of failure.
That vulnerability is why the book works, I think. He confesses right in the intro that he was not a Don Juan. He actually suffered from severe premature ejaculation, PE. He talks about feeling like a sexual cripple.
That's a really heavy term to use for yourself.
It just shows the shame men feel about this. He had extreme anxiety. So he started performing oral sex, not because he was some enlightened guy. He used it as a crutch.
A backup plan because he couldn't do the main act.
Exactly. He figured, I can't last long enough with my penis, so I'll use my mouth to make up for it. But then he had this huge realization. He discovered that this crutch, it was actually a superpower.
The women liked the backup plan better than the main plan.
Yes. He realized that for so many women, the way of the tongue wasn't second best. It was superior. It was necessary. He went from feeling biologically cursed to realizing he'd stumbled upon the secret.
That is a classic case of failing upwards.
It really is. And it forces us to rethink what real sex even is. We have this script in our heads where intercourse is the main event. But his experience and the data suggest for female physiology, that script is completely backward.
Okay, let's get into that physiology, because I think a lot of us men and women have a pretty foggy memory of high school biology.
And the diagrams were terrible.
That were awful.
So Kerner says most men know more about what's under the hood of their car than what's under the hood of the clitoris.
I think that's probably true.
So we need a little anatomy lesson here. The first big idea is homology.
Homology. Okay, that sounds technical. What's it mean?
It just means the clitoris and the penis are made from the exact same embryonic tissue. In the womb, we all start out the same. Then, depending on chromosomes, that tissue either becomes a penis or a clitoris. They're biological counterparts.
So they're the same, but different.
Correct. But here's the crucial difference. The penis is a multi-tool. It's for reproduction, and it's for waste elimination. It has a day job.
Right, it's utilitarian.
The clitoris. It is the only organ in the human body, male or female, designed solely for pleasure. It does nothing else. It doesn't urinate. It doesn't give birth. It is a dedicated pleasure machine.
I've heard stats about the nerve endings.
They're staggering. The glands of the clitoris, the visible part, has about 8,000 nerve endings.
8,000?
That is twice as many as the penis.
Twice as many, in a much smaller area.
In a much, much smaller area.
Yeah.
But here's the biggest misconception, and Kerner uses an iceberg analogy to explain it.
The iceberg.
Most people think the clitoris is just that visible little nub, the button at the top.
The love button.
Right.
That's usually the extent of it.
Exactly. But that's just the glands. That's the tip of the iceberg. The clitoris is actually this massive, complex network. It has a shaft and it has legs called crura.
Wait, legs?
Yes, legs, like a wishbone. And they wrap around the vagina internally. So it's not a button, it's a whole system. It's a 3D structure inside the body.
So when we talk about penetration, we're usually missing the mark, because the assumption is the vagina is where all the action is.
And this is the core of the issue. Kerner cites a Kinsey study with gynecologists where they tested the sensitivity of the vaginal walls,
Yeah.
the deep interior walls of the vagina. They're actually relatively insensitive.
Really? That seems so counterintuitive.
Well, think about it biologically. If the birth canal was as sensitive as the clitoris, childbirth would be, well, it would be impossible. The pain would be fatal. So the deep vagina has very few nerve endings. It's kind of a dead zone for sharp sensation.
That explains so much.
It does. And Kerner has this really vivid analogy. He says, trying to stimulate the clitoris, where all the nerves are, through intercourse is like trying to write calligraphy with a fat magic marker,
A blunt instrument.
a blunt instrument.
Mm.
You're just relying on indirect friction and pressure. It can work for some people, sure, but it's really inefficient.
Okay, so if the penis is the blunt instrument, let's talk about the sharp instrument, the tongue.
The tongue. Kerner argues it is perfectly designed for the job. I mean, think about it. It's a muscle that isn't attached at both ends.
Which makes it incredibly versatile.
The acrobat of the mouth. It can be soft, hard, pointed, flat, wet, dry. It has a range of motion a penis just doesn't have. And this is crucial. It doesn't have a refractory period.
Okay, remind us what the refractory period is.
It's the recovery time. After a man ejaculates, the system shuts down for a bit. The blood leaves. He can't go again right away. The tongue, it doesn't go limp. It can keep going as long as you can breathe.
So it has stamina and precision.
Exactly. Bring back to that painting analogy. If the female orgasm is a fine, detailed landscape, you wouldn't use a paint roller.
That's the penis.
That's the penis. You need a fine brush. That's the tongue.
So does the data back this up? Is this more than just Kerner's preference?
Oh, the data is overwhelming. He cites the height report, data for Men's Health. The numbers are pretty consistent. Women orgasm from intercourse alone about 25% of the time.
1 in 4.
But from oral sex, that number jumps to around 81%.
Whoa, that is a massive jump, 25 to 81.
It's the difference between a gamble and a sure thing. It's like we've been trying to open a complex lock with a key that doesn't quite fit when the master key is right there in our mouths.
So why are we so confused about this? Why is there this cultural myth that real sex has to equal penetration?
Well, you can say 2 words. Sigmund Freud.
Ah, Freud. It always comes back to him, doesn't it?
Unfortunately. Freud did a real number on female sexuality. He created this hierarchy of orgasms. He claimed a clitoral orgasm was immature and that a mature woman should transfer her sensitivity to the vagina.
So if you couldn't orgasm from penetration, Freud basically said you were emotionally stunted.
Yes, he called the vaginal orgasm the mature response. And this created generations of anxiety for women who felt broken because their bodies didn't match his theory.
So how does Kerner dismantle that?
He uses Occam's razor.
But the idea that the simplest explanation is probably the right one.
Right, we have all these terms floating around. Vaginal orgasm, clitoral, G-spot, blended. It's so confusing. Kerner says, stop. Anatomically, the clitoris is the powerhouse. It's the source.
So you're saying all orgasms are basically clitoral?
In essence, yes. Even the legendary G-spot. Kerner cites a science writer, Natalie Angier, who describes it not as some magic button, but likely just the backside of the clitoris, those legs, being stimulated through the vaginal wall.
So it's all one network?
It's all the same network.
Huh?
And a vaginal orgasm is often just stimulation of the parts of the clitoris that wrap around the entrance.
That is actually a huge relief to hear. It simplifies everything. You don't have to go hunting for 5 different types of orgasm like they're Pokemon.
Exactly. Just focus on the one organ that was actually designed for it.
Okay, so we've covered the mismatch, the anatomy, the iceberg, and why the tongue is the superior tool. But I want to circle back to the mindset. Because Kerner isn't just giving a biology lesson, he's advocating for a philosophy.
He is. This is the thinking man part of the title. He's pushing for this shift from foreplay to core play as a form of modern chivalry.
Chivalry, that sounds a little old-fashioned, like holding doors open.
He reclaims it. He's saying, look, biology dealt men and women different hands, one fast, one slow. The chivalrous and just logical thing to do is to bridge that gap.
So it's not just about being good in bed, it's about fairness.
It's about empathy. When a man ensures his partner comes first, he's acknowledging that her experience matters just as much, even if your body works differently. And practically, like we said, it takes all the anxiety out of it for him, too.
It reminds me of the end of the book. He brings in one last metaphor that I thought was really beautiful, the violin.
The Stradivarius.
Tell us about that, because usually when you talk about technique, it sounds so mechanical, but this was different.
Right. He says that while technique matters, you need to know your grammar, know where the notes are. Every woman is a unique instrument. You can't just apply some robotic technique.
You have to listen.
You have to listen to the feedback. He compares the tongue to the bow of the violin. It's about finding that unique rhythm and pressure and resonance with your partner. It elevates the whole thing from something mechanical to something artistic.
And communicative.
It's the language of love, spoken literally.
So for the listener tuning in, male, female, partnered, single, what's the big takeaway here?
I think the takeaway is we need to stop fighting biology.
Yeah.
The orgasm gap isn't some big mystery. It's a design feature. It's just how we're built. But we have the tools to solve it. It takes patience, understanding the real anatomy, and a willingness to put her pleasure first.
Literally and figuratively.
Exactly. And honestly,
Yeah.
it requires dropping the ego, admitting that maybe the way we've been taught to do things isn't the best way.
And I think there's a broader lesson there, too. We live in such a rushed world. Everything is about speed, efficiency. Sex often falls into that trap. It becomes another item on the to-do
A
list.
chore or a release valve.
Right. But Kerner is asking us to slow down, to spend 20 minutes just exploring, to care more about the journey than the destination. And I think if you apply that mindset, not just in the bedroom, but everywhere, it really changes how you connect with people.
It turns an interaction into a real connection. And that's always worth the time.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and maybe go practice your grammar.
See you next time.